All right, this is the Rob Kendall Show. That's my name. Thanks for joining us tonight on IndianaTalks.com. Another exciting hour of radio coming your way, and we appreciate all of those of you who are tuned in live at our new drive time slot, 3 p.m., our replay at 9 on Indiana Talks, or listening via podcast on the We Are Libertarians radio network. Very special guest on our show today, the great, legendary Jay Baker.
Thanks for having me, Robbie, and I just wanted to let you know that I've always had that carefully prepared list of questions that my publicist has given to you so that I don't have to answer anything annoying or embarrassing from any type of previous broadcast experience.
Here's the two things I want to point out about you. Most people, when we have them on the show, like their levels go up, they go down on our meter, a little inside gab here. Your levels are perfect. Like
Thank
your
you.
tone, your inflection, it never changes. Like it was like the voice from God.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You know what was funny? I went into broadcasting when I was 16 because somebody said, you have a voice for radio. Later, when I found out it involved no heavy lifting and working in a climate-controlled building, I thought this could be perfect for me.
Now, the other thing I was going to say is, and I was thinking about this today on the drive up here, if I'm 50 years old, it's still going to be the coolest thing in the world to be on the radio with Jay Baker.
No, I appreciate that.
I mean, you think about, we had Adam Ritz on last week, and we were talking to Adam about the lineage of people that he inspired, and he brought up you. And I was going to say that no matter how far your career goes, you will have a tree of people that have gone on to great things in broadcasting that were inspired by you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And it was kind of funny that you spoke to Adam. I am so proud of what Adam has done. And Adam is a classic example of a guy who could have ruined his life by some of his choices, and has chosen to really rise above and be inspirational. But it warms my heart up when Adam says that he was inspired by me, because Adam literally was one of my interns when I worked at WZPL, and it was just so hilarious because he and I just hit it off immediately.
Well, it's funny because you think about we always talk about the tree, and I first learned this in politics, where there was a great candidate that inspired me to want to get involved, and then he decided not to run again. And he said, I'm far more effective doing writing and things like that. And I said, but you don't know how many people are out there that you never know about who, because of something you said on the campaign at some appearance at a Denny's somewhere, that wanted to get involved. And he said, you're right. But you think about how many people, not only in this city, but cities across the Midwest, who may have popped open a microphone for the first time because of Jay Baker.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You know what I think is funny is I have come to realize as I get a little older that almost everybody has a knack for something. And like you said, you touch a great politician. And from being in politics yourself, you tapped into his sincerity and his skill set. And ironically, with radio, is you got to look back and you go, of all the weird skills in the world, probably can't play Frisbee all that well, not a terrific golfer, but for some reason, I always had a knack for broadcasting. So when I met people who would say, wow, I really liked when you did this, or this really made me laugh, or this inspired me, to me, that's such a great compliment, because honestly, and people don't want to hear this, you get into this business because it's a lot of fun. I mean, you've alluded to that in your writing. This business is a blast, and you're on the tail end of a generation that said, being on the radio is very cool. Why? Because it's show business. You're in front of people. Obviously, if you're on television on Channel 6 News, it's like next time you're pushing the cart down the aisle, it's like, you're on Channel 6 News, and that elevates you, or seemingly elevates you above the mundane. And it wasn't all that long ago that radio seemed very magical, did it not?
Right.
When you were growing up, you said, I really enjoyed listening to the radio at night. And generationally, we all have. The radio was so important to us. Somebody asked me about, what inspired me. And what inspired me was listening to Chicago radio, because I grew up in northern Indiana.
The region.
Yeah, you South Bend fans know what I'm talking about. But you'd hear Chicago radio. And I remember being on this family vacation with my dad.
Take a lot of family vacations as a kid?
Well, of course, you have to. With the divorced parents, each parent's trying to outdo themselves, Your dad took you there. Well, look where I'm going to take you. That goes. But we're up and you hear Chicago radio booming across Michigan. So we're staying at some resort on the western edge of, the state of Michigan. And you just hear, it's the first time I heard Sweet Emotion on the radio. And then you just hear this guy come on, WDAI Chicago, brand new one from Aerosmith. And you just go, I want to be that guy because he is so in the now. He's just so there. And this maybe seems simplistic, but I wanted to be on the radio because I wanted to be that person that brought that coolness factor to you. Not because I wanted to be the cool guy. I just thought to myself, I like the conduit of that. I like the fact that that guy was letting you in on, hey man, we're the coolest guys in this room. We like Aerosmith better than anyone else.
Right.
And this is before, obviously, 80s, 90s Aerosmith, which is now like a package in a tube. And I'm not belittling their music accomplishments. So we've talked about, there are some great, great, great artists. Some have, some have great gravitas. You, of course, you might have heard of Bruce Springsteen.
We love the boss.
The man from New Jersey.
He's the best.
Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about, that was very high quality music. We were presenting it in a way that just, it tied everyone in together. People used to use radio because they wanted to find out which concert was coming to town. They wanted to know, which artists had new albums. Rock and roll news, Jim Morrison's dead in a bathtub. And, this is after my time, but point being is you heard about it first on the radio, and those were important things. Led Zeppelin broke up. It's like, people were devastated. I was on the air the night the Leonard Skinner plane crash happened. And, that's a very tying central theme to many people's lives. Obviously very pre-internet. If you hear Leonard Skinner plane crash and you're listening to, at the time, WRBR South Bend, and people were killed, so we can't make fun of a plane crash. But, people really, they want information. They need to know more. Oh, my goodness, this is a band that I love. What happened? Oh, God, Ronnie Van Zant's dead. And other people were hurt, but most of the band survived. And how did this happen? And why did this happen? And, you couldn't just go to a search engine then and type in Leonard Skinner plane crash and get 5,000 Google articles. You had to rely on the radio. And that's what was so immediate and such an attractant to me.
Get our guest here on the Rob Kendall Show this afternoon or evening, wherever you're listening from. We're so cool they put us on twice in the same day now.
I think so.
I think we've earned it.
Well, and I love podcasting now, and I've been fortunate enough to be on a few podcasts.
You have some experience.
Yes, I'm experienced on podcasts now, but I appreciate you inviting me. And I will just tell you, it's refreshing to be the guest.
Yeah.
Because ordinarily for me, when I'm working, it's like, ask Rob something interesting, and that ties in with what he just said. So if you go, Rob goes, I really like ice cream. Then you go, what's your favorite flavor? And then if he doesn't give if he gives too short of an answer, you have to go, but you have never been to Dairy Queen? So I love being the guest because I don't have to think of the next question.
Again, our guest is the legendary Jay Baker, and Jay has a ton of exciting stuff going on in his life, and it'd be very easy for me to sit here and talk about radio stories, which we'll get into a few later if you're okay with that.
Sure, absolutely.
But you have something really, really cool going on right now, which is, and I was trying to think of the most articulate way to describe this, so I'm just going to be unarticulate. You're very skinny again.
Well, thank you. I've re-embraced my fitness. I was very fit in the late 80s. And, we talked a little bit about this. It's real easy, I think, sometimes. We used to refer to it as the ever-popular tortured artist effect, which Todd Rundgren ironically released an album with that same name. But what it said was, you could go through enough weird stuff in your life that it would just make you totally veer off a course. I can't really pinpoint it, so it's not like, boy, I can tell you some Housewives of New Jersey horrible story, but probably from the 90s on, and, a lot of it was job-related stress, a lot going on, tried to do a morning show in Cincinnati. I just veered away from my fitness, and I probably put on anywhere from about 7 to 12 pounds a year. And it doesn't sound too bad, but it's bad enough.
The radio police are coming for you, by the way.
You put on 7 pounds, it's against the law. But, you and I both know, you do the math. If you're around long enough, you go, hey, I put on 7 pounds a year for the past 8 years. Well, that's 56 pounds, my friends. And I just got to the point where I just got progressively heavier, just got away from fitness. Fitness, as you know, because you enjoy fitness yourself, it's not like a light switch. You have to kind of morph into that lifestyle. And the very first day that you decide I'm going to work out, you're not working out
Right.
like an Olympic athlete. You're working out like a guy who's trying to survive a walk around the block because you haven't been walking around the block.
It's interesting. My commitment to physical fitness involves the 21 to 25-year-old females in Broad Ripple and impressing them. But yours was just like a go get it attitude because you are a happily married man.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I am a very happily married man, love my spouse, and she's been very supportive of this. And to her absolute credit, when I was at my heaviest, she never said a word. When you look back on that, you have to almost go, well, how could that even be? Because most people would be like, hey, if their spouse, is packing on the pounds like crazy. But she never ever said a word. She's been very supportive of this.
We love Mrs. B.
We love Mrs. B. And Mrs. B has a nicer job than I have, so we especially love that part of it.
Now, it's how much weight have you lost, and over what time period?
I've lost 150 pounds now.
So you've lost Rob Kendall.
I've lost a Rob Kendall. Yes, absolutely. And I should have lost you years ago. What was I thinking? All I had to do was open the car door, one shove. I just keep driving. But I started doing this in June of 2012. And what precipitated it, there's always a comment or two. If you're big, you already know you're big. And people are usually very polite around you. But there was a coworker one time that was telling me a story, and you'll appreciate this because it's at a radio station. Where else but a radio station? And this guy was just a very interesting guy, not blunt in a bad way, but just direct. So he's telling the story, and he goes, yeah, so I'm at this place, and there's this big guy. Well, not as big as you. And I think he tried to reel it in. You know what I mean? But then later you're like thinking, wow, I'm bigger than I think I am.
Right.
We're in our own package. You're obviously aware maybe a theater seat or a stadium seat's a little tight.
Right.
You know how that goes. But you're in your own package, so you don't have the total 3D feel of what your body looks like. So I thought, well, it was that comment. Then coupled with, I read an article. Do you remember when Charles Barkley became the spokesperson for Weight Watchers?
Right.
And I don't know if he still is, but Charles Barkley, and he's so outspoken, and about half the stuff he says, you just want to hit him in the face. But the other half of the stuff you say, I'm really glad that Charles said that. He had pointed out that he took the Weight Watchers gig because he said men tend not to talk to other men about weight loss. Women might get together, and this is not meant to be, a he said, she said, or this is what women do. Like, yeah, I have zero idea what women do. My life is a rich history of that. But they said that sociologically, women would converse with each other about, hey, listen, I don't know if you struggle, but I've tried to lose 12 pounds. A woman might say that to
Right.
a guy would never say that to another guy. I mean, you've been a guy most of your life.
Most of my life.
Most of your life, yes, as far as you can remember. But I thought his point was really well taken. And then in the same article, and just talk about just sheer happenstance, they mentioned a phone app called Lose It. And all Lose It does is walk you through, you're this weight, you want to weigh this much in this length of time. And it's a calorie counting program. And all you do is count calories. Now, anyone that's listening to this podcast that's a strict nutritionalist is now screaming.
They're angry at you.
They've thrown their computer off the desk, and they're mad at me because I'm now just telling you, just count calories. Obviously, if you have 3 banana splits for breakfast, there's some caloric input. And you also hopefully you probably won't feel particularly well the rest of the day. Oh, sure, it's delicious. Don't get me wrong. But anyway,
it's like what Adam Ritz talked about last week. There's good repercussions and bad repercussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but for most people, and you can obviously fine tune it later, but for most people, it is a calories in, calories out equation. And you and I both know, if you and I were going to go to a ball game, because you and I, we love baseball.
Well, and it was our lifelong dream to hop the railing at the baseball stadium.
Because didn't that happen for a White Sox
Yeah,
game?
yeah,
Father-son combo.
yeah. For those of you who may not know, many years ago, it's hard to believe. I think it's probably been a decade.
Sure.
There was an incident at a White Sox game where a father-son tandem removed their shirts, and didn't they attack the first base coach?
I think they attacked the first base coach, and the obviously the security guys had to go out and
Right.
apprehend them. But you and I were marveling at that it was a father-son combo because we viewed that there was probably some
Right.
bonding going on, and that bonding extended to, instead of let's really yell for our team or maybe say a few things to the to the umps, let's remove our shirts, leap the rail,
Right.
and accost the first base.
And then there's some mugshots of them afterwards, and it was just absolutely.
Well, we just laughed and laughed and laughed, and that's why you've always referred to me as Uncle Jay, because we have some years between us, and it wouldn't have been too big of a stretch. And it's like here's Uncle Jay and his young ward Rob, and they're at a game, and well, they got a little out of control, So
Well, it's really funny. We should point out for the record, because I get this question all the time, because I just refer to you as Uncle Jay to everyone.
Yeah.
Jay is not really my uncle.
No,
we are not
I'm
really
not.
related. Really, Jay's your uncle? No. Jay is.
I'm just Uncle Jay.
Yeah. Though I did rent a building from Jay at one point, so he was
There
my
you did.
landlord.
Yes, just briefly. But anyway, it's just one of those things. We love ball games. And I introduced you to, there's certain stadium foods that you got to seek out.
Right.
The Build-A-Burger.
The Build-A-Burger.
Absolutely.
Which you'll love this. Some friends and I went to the Indians game this summer, and one of the friends had never heard of Build-A-Burger. And I said, you got to do Build-A-Burger. We went. The guy's in love with the Build-A-Burger. He's a season ticket holder to the Indians, and he's like, I've got to start coming to more games just so I can go get my $6 Build-A-Burger.
$6 Build-A-Burger is absolutely the best. Now, once again, the same nutritionist that's thrown their computer off the desk is going, now you guys went from fitness to Build-A-Burger. But that's part of this whole calorie counting thing. Because if you say, look, I'm going to go to the ball game with Rob. I'm hitting Build-A-Burger, and I'm probably going to drink a couple stadium beers, and then I might even have a Cracker Jack to top the evening off. You just plan ahead. And once again, it's just one of those things. So yes, I knock on wood because now it's allowed me to enjoy Build-A-Burger with a totally clear conscience.
Well, two things. One is I've seen this firsthand. We watched the national championship football game together this year.
Right.
Unfortunately, your team did better than mine. Roll Tide.
Yes.
And I watched the game with a whole bunch of Alabama fans, which was just terrible.
Oh, I know.
But you were literally sizing it up, going, okay, I've had this many calories today. So this plate of chips and salsa, I'll only have 10 chips and salsa.
Right.
So you are very on it.
No, thank you for that. And that's the hardest part, as you know. When you are at a restaurant and you glance over the next table and you see a person that is overweight and they're eating like the biggest meal in there, you don't know kind of where they're at on the quantum theory. You might say, yeah, that person really needs to watch what they eat. That might be the only meal that person's eaten all day. You don't know what kind of struggles they're having. And, none of this is a one size fits all. I think it was interesting that you actually had real contact with the Ultimate Warrior.
Right.
And, professional wrestling, no matter where you're at, whether you just view it as entertainment, whether you view it as, a fixation or wherever it is, Rob is a super fan of wrestling. And I think it was cool to be able to talk to one of your heroes because you and I both know that any of that aside, the fitness level of almost all those athletes, you have to be
right
amazed by. Even Ric Flair, one of my favorites. I mean, Ric Flair is still in tremendously good shape. And so, yes, those guys have to remain fit. And I think it's cool that Ultimate Warrior has the Ultimate Warrior workout.
We love the Warrior workout. But you're doing this for a reason other than now impressing women by the truckloads. You are getting back into cycling again.
I am. Cycling's always been my first love, and I have zero idea, but I am so drawn to endurance cycling. I like the whole thing of we have to go so many miles and so far. And I cut my teeth on this by doing what is known as 24-hour races, and it's a thing to see how far you can go in 24
now, this
hours.
was years ago, though, that you did a lot
yeah,
of this
stuff.
stuff.
This was like almost unheard of back in the 80s. There were only just a handful of crazy people doing it.
And we should point out our guest, the voice, you recognize it, but we'll introduce him, is indie radio legend Jay Baker talking about Well, he lost Rob Kendall. Literally lost.
I did.
You lost what I weigh.
Yeah,
That's
it's
incredible.
kind of cool, isn't it?
And a little side story, last time I was here at the office with Jay, he actually held up a couple Culligan water jugs and goes, Robbie, hold 2 of these. And realize I've lost these 2 full jugs of water plus 1 more of these.
Yeah, it's
It's
kind of
incredible.
incredible, isn't it? Because, it's so funny. It only weighs 45 pounds, but 2 of them are 90.
Right.
You and I both know if you schlep those around, because you work out, I work out, you'd be like, man, you and I could build a workout that would kill each other
Right.
with those water jugs. And you realize, dude, you were carrying 90 pounds plus on
Right.
your system. And you think, where did it even go?
And that's one of the things that dawned on me, and we were kidding about it because one of my friends, because we have some photos together on Facebook, when he saw the first photo of you since you've lost all this weight, because to your credit, you kind of did this under the radar. Like a lot of people will do it and go, hey, I'm coming back, making a comeback,
Right.
and I'm losing all this weight. You just showed up one day and are skinny, and the guy actually goes, is Jay okay? Did he have some sort of illness? I mean, and it was legit concern.
Yeah, and it's good that they are concerned. But you know what's interesting about this? I lost this literally at 2 pounds a week, which is kind of like the recommended level if you've got a lot of weight to lose.
Right.
And, you know, I started so heavy that obviously the first 60 pounds was going to go pretty quick.
Right.
And, I did a lot of justification with myself. I played high school football. I've always been kind of a big guy anyway. So I was always that guy that I could probably carry like around 250, 260 and not look freakish. But when you're tipping beyond 300, even if you're kind of, you
Right.
found some sweaters and stuff so you don't look too bad, you know what I'm talking about. You still have to say to yourself, no,
Right.
that's an unhealthy weight, and you can't feel real good at that weight. I mean,
Right.
there's just going to be aspects of your life. You and
Unless
I,
you're Jake Long.
yes, absolutely. If
Right.
you're a professional football player and you need that weight because there's another 300-pound guy
Right.
that's ramming into you at full speed, you need to weigh 300 pounds. Well, and I think another example of that is Jeff Saturday,
Right.
who had a football playing weight. He finished his final season up with the Green Bay Packers. Now they've spotted him on the Colts sideline, and Jeff Saturday and I are about the same size now. And
Yeah.
if you think about it, we were a different size a year ago.
Yeah.
He was more fit then, though.
It's absolutely incredible. And one of the other things before we get into some radio stories, by the way, loved your appearance on Hammer and Nigel. That was great.
Thank you
those
very
guys are
much.
just the best. It's got to be cool for you. And we talked about this at the beginning of the show, but it's like even those guys are good 10, 12 years older than me. And even them, it's like Elvis has walked into the room. It's like, because they were telling me for weeks, they were saying, we got to get Jay on the show. We got to get Jay on the show. And then you're there, and it's like you meant to those guys who, like I said, are a good decade and a half older than me, the same thing you meant to me. That's got to be just awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. And, Nigel and I had the good fortune of being able to work together, back when, we called it Club 6161, which is the address for Fall Creek Road, which is where X103 and Q95 and WNDE emanate from. And it was just so cool. Adam was one of the best. Here's what's really funny. Here's what a lot of people probably never realize. And sometimes you have to have a historical perspective. And I was pleased that I was there to see it. Everyone obviously knows how great Bob and Tom are. They're great. But I was there the first day they walked in the building.
Yeah, you were there before they were.
Absolutely. I was there in 1981. I started in December of 1981.
And kind of a cool thing back then was you used to do a lot of traveling through Brownsburg at the time.
Yes, I was married to my first spouse who lived in Brownsburg. Hey, want to go to Harley's? Sure.
Anyway.
Well, we paved, I worked for a company that paved Indiana 267, Rob.
Really?
The main north-south road that runs right through Brownsburg. And it was funny, we paved from US 36 in Avon to the south side of Brownsburg, and that was municipal. And we were only hired by the state. So we picked up all of our equipment, moved it to the north of town, started paving again. And, if you think about it, if the city of Brownsburg, and now you have more association with the city of Brownsburg, if Brownsburg had only shaken hands with the state, we would have paved your main street too. But we picked up all of our equipment and just bypassed you.
Well, and it's interesting because we went through a lot of that with this local acquisition of 267. So somewhere along the line, someone in Brownsburg offended someone at NDOT. I don't know who it was. It's fascinating, though, to hear you. And this is why we every time we do this, we get together, we get on one topic, and we're on the next one before we finish the last one. But it's fascinating to think of, and a lot of people would never think of you as anything other than a broadcaster.
Right.
There's a lot of people in politics I know that had day jobs before they were in politics. That's what you did. You worked construction before
Sure.
you were a radio broadcaster.
Yeah, I just, my uncle worked for an asphalt paving firm, and it was like, well, do you want a summer job when you're at university? Because it's a little hot, but I think you're going to like it. And of course, the people you meet as a laborer.
Oh, yes.
Well, and we always used to laugh in radio that certain jobs screamed, stay in school. And once again, anybody who labors, don't take this the wrong way, but asphalt paving screams, stay in school.
Right.
That's a tough job.
Well, and we were talking about obviously your time at the Q and the people you influenced. That one of the cool things is you're back at the Q.
Yeah.
And here's how I found this out. One of my buddies sends me puts a message on Facebook and goes, "I've got Q95 on, and the guy on air mentions Rob Kendall after a Bruce Springsteen song." And I said, okay, well, that's got to be Jay. And so I called Jay up and I said, hey, I wanted to thank you for the mention, which we talked about. That's the magic of radio, is that
Right.
your buddy's listening in a garage across town and calls you up and goes, hey, I just heard you on the radio of a city of 1.5 million people.
It is funny, isn't it? And that's why radio, that's why I've lamented, I don't sit in a darkened room and drum my fingers like the fictional character in Citizen Kane. I'm not like I'm not like Rosebud as I keel over. But I just have always lamented that some of the magic of radio has gone away, because think about how simple that was. That's basically saying, hey, you and I have been friends for a long time. You're a huge Springsteen fan. We're playing this countdown, which had featured the top 500, classic rock songs.
Right.
So a number of those songs, obviously, feature Bruce Springsteen,
Right.
because I think about 10 or 15 of his songs feature prominently in the top 500 because of, you look at the greatness factor.
What a great man he is.
Oh, absolutely. And just an amazing output. But you just laugh because as people may not always think about this, but you're on the radio, all of a sudden you got to dream up stuff to say.
Right.
So you're like, now I've said every possible thing I can say about Bruce Springsteen, but I haven't mentioned my buddy Rob, who, and I love being able to put, because you and I know we had a station background where we had an owner that just looked at both of us like we were just a couple of idiots. He totally discounted you. And then the best thing he ever said about me, he said, somebody told me that Jay Baker was a legend. Pause. But I never heard it. And you're like, okay, and that's fine, but why would you share that with somebody? I heard he was a legend, but I never. It'd be like a guy going, yeah, I worked out with, I worked out with Fran Tarkenton, the football player, but he just seems slow. It's one of those deals, So,
but it is that.
But we were in that
right.
that environment where people were like, these people don't amount to anything. And I think it's so cool that you got into grassroots, then later mainstream politics, and said, no, you're the guy that's always been able to look at a situation and say, can this be done?
Right.
And you said, yes, it can be done. And it was part of your conviction about politics. So that's what I lament about the magic of radio. And so that's why it's fun to be able to say on the air, by the way, Councilman Rob Kendall, because it's just one of those things that's hilarious to say in light of the background we had. Because it's not the background that you and I had where we're breaking rocks at Michigan City at the penitentiary. Right. We're at a radio station where a guy has looked at both of us, and we're as expendable as the folding chair beneath the table in the break room. I mean, you know that. And it's so easy to be in those environments where they treat you like that. And I'm not saying, hey, in every environment, people should glorify us, but you can really be around some people that can really detract from what your life energy could be. And you and I meet people all the time. It's kind of sad. I'm no big zealot about it, but you really can have anything you want. Now, you can't have everything you want. You know how that goes.
Right.
You can't say, I think I'm going to get in shape, get a PhD, and get a job with Lilly all in 1 year. It's probably not going to happen. But if you legitimately got up one morning and said, I want to lose 100 pounds, you and I both know you can do it.
Right. Well, and one of the things that, and before we talk about Q here real quick, Shane Ray, the guy that owns XRB Radio, who I know you know Shane well, and we always talk about this. Shane always says, your song just sounds better when you hear it on the radio. So you could take Born to Run and hear it on your CD player, But when you hear it on Q95, you know everyone else in this darn city's listening to my song too.
Isn't that great? Yeah, and that's a really valid point, and I never heard it put that way, but it absolutely is. And you know every artist that's heard their song for the first time on the radio. I mean, you
Right.
can imagine George Harrison hearing his song for the first time on the radio. I mean, you're turning it up.
Right.
It's like the scene in That Thing You Do, where, hey, they're playing our song.
Well, one more quick Springsteen story here. I was really into Springsteen when I was 19, 20, 21
Right.
years old, and I used to talk to Jay about it all the time. And we were talking about the song The River, and Jay has always put things in a way that are just, he's so non-dramatic about how he says it, but you realize what he's saying is, as the young kids say today, truth. Jay looks at me and goes, I'm talking about lines in the song The River, and there's a great line at the end of the song that says, is a dream a lie if it doesn't come true, or is it something worse? And I'm talking to Jay about it, and Jay just looks at a 19-year-old Rob Kendall and goes, Rob, sometimes guys just write things down on paper because they rhyme. And just goes back on about his airship.
And I later, since you've repeated that story, I realized that really struck a chord with you, and you almost feel like, wow, I might have been a little too scathing that day.
I mean, it was just here's my statement. Next song.
Well, it's funny because but to amplify that slightly, because that does make it sound like I'm like this cynical Howard Hessman character from a bad KRP episode. But Rob always used to, I mean, you love Bruce Springsteen. That was good. As I told you, I thought he was always an uneven
Right.
lyric writer. I think some of his lyrics were just absolutely brilliant. And then some of his lyrics are like, wow. You need to review that just a little bit. Because we've talked about the fact that there are some artists that have some shockingly deep lyrics.
Right.
And so we tend to sort of,
Right.
And you and I both know everybody hears something different in a song.
Right.
Like, here's what's really strange. Like, one of my favorite artists, and I can say this unabashedly because somebody's trying to give me the business about this, but one of my favorite artists is Katy Perry because of the way she phrases her song. She is insanely talented.
I am a lion, and you're going to hear me. What is it? You're going to hear me roar.
Yeah. So, point being is, I like Katy Perry as much as I like Bad Company.
Right.
And people be, oh, it's sheer travesty. You're supposed to be a rock and roll disc jockey. What's wrong with you? Because you can't help but hear the talent where you hear the talent.
Right.
And you and I both know sometimes it's a set of lyrics. Sometimes it's a song phrasing. Quite frankly, the song Teenage Dream, Rolling Stone said this is the best song of the year 2 years ago.
Right.
Well, the line in the song Teenage Dream is Katy Perry saying very plaintively, we'll be young forever. Now think about the resonance of that, because who amongst us doesn't said, we'll be young forever?
Right.
And then you get to a certain point in life and you go, maybe I'm not going to be young forever. Maybe life does change and morph and move on. And I just think that that's so cool because everyone, I don't care who you are, has said we'll be young forever. And so once again, not to overplay a line in a Katy Perry song, but you know how I told you, and you hear different songs. Like I love Van Morrison. You can barely understand anything he says. And he's had some deep songs, but the standard Van Morrison is almost like a tumbler full of Irish whiskey. Moon dance, blue-eyed girl, and it's all great stuff. But, you like him for a different reason. You like him because he is
Right.
one of the crooners / belters. Here's a guy that can work with any band and belt out a tune. He's apparently impossible to work with. He's this, the curmudgeonly Irish guy
Right.
who probably does drink a little in the studio and the whole thing. But, it's like the thing is undeniable that some of his music is brilliant.
Well, it's so funny because there used to be a song that they used to play when we worked at the old WKLU.
Yes.
Which we used to so diligently refer to as Quinn FM.
Yes.
Named after the Quinn brothers that own the station, called Cleaning Windows.
Yes.
And I love that song Cleaning Windows by Van Morrison because there's the line at the end where he says, "Don't let it slide. I'm a working man in my prime, just cleaning windows."
Yeah.
And you always got that, and that was one of the cool things. Again, our guest on the Rob Kendall Show this week is indie radio legend Jay Baker, and I wrote about this in the book, how you were always able to say, hey, Rob, here's some really cool lyrics from a song you may have not heard before. Take a few minutes, hear
Right.
it through, and then form an opinion for yourself. And I thought one guy you introduced me to that was great with that was Michael Stanley.
Oh, yes. And Michael Stanley's very good, but it's very unsung. He was an artist out of Cleveland, Ohio. And one of my favorite, you know how you were saying, certain things I hear on your podcast, your warrior poster, which you were told to take down, come on, got to leave it up. But one of my favorite pictures is when you, and I don't know if the Vogue still has these or not, but it used to be when artists would come,
Right.
like the headshots for comedians.
Hmm.
It's that little 8x10
Right.
glossy photo, and
Yeah.
it'd always be, Muddy Waters playing at the Vogue, and it'd be like, to the Vogue, great, had a great time, Muddy Waters.
Right.
And it was such a keepsake because Muddy Waters played there, and if you go there, you go, wow, this place must be cool. Muddy Waters played here. Well, when the Michael Stanley Band came through Indianapolis the last time, I got one of those autographed pictures, and it was just for me the best. And like you like Bruce Springsteen, I love Michael
Right.
Stanley. Well, I loved him when I was in college in Ohio, and now here I'm a disc jockey in Indianapolis. I'm hanging out with Michael Stanley. He was on the air with me for 2 hours, which is unheard of
Right.
nowadays, because it used to be, like artists would come in, introduce a song, see you later,
Right.
But he came in, he's hanging around. We're talking about Cleveland and Ohio and all that stuff. After the concert, their drummer is like, Jay, come on back here, man. I didn't get a chance to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. I'm sitting there with this drummer 90 minutes after the show, just talking.
So one of the cool things is you are back where you belong.
Well, thank you.
You are home on
Well,
Q95.
it is fun, and it was kind of interesting that posting on Facebook, I'm back,
Yeah.
and I got back on Q95 in a kind of a strange way. I'd been around. I literally was fired from there, and I think I've spoken to people about that. And part of it is when
It's just
you
part of the job in radio, though.
well, it is, and too, the stations now get acquired by these huge chains, and I maybe not everybody knows about it, but that's kind of the way it is. Like if you work at ABC and ESPN's in the building and Walt Disney World buys you, and it's all that stuff's intertwined. We Q95 got purchased by a really big corporation probably about 12, 14 years ago. I was one of the original guys to kind of get downsized because that's kind of what's happening in broadcasting. So it's not like I'm telling you some evil thing. It just kind of is what it is.
We got downsized from an individually owned radio station too. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can happen to anybody, and it was one of those situations. Well, now through default, enough people.
By the way,
have
we
left.
love that your office at work is right next to the train tracks.
I think that if you're nostalgic for trains, if you say to yourself, this represents a part of Americana that's slipping away, you say, not here, not at the Jay Baker office. It's right back where you need it to be.
It's literally like Casey Jones is just driving past your.
Well, we're right by an intersection here, so I have found that some of the rookie engineers really lay on the horn. Now, the more experienced guy just hits the horn a couple times,
right?
Like that last guy, pretty professional.
Yeah.
The rookie, he kind of gets on the horn a little bit.
So there's various levels of train enthusiasm.
I think there is, and I think there's various levels of train engineering, and I think that probably it's best for America that the train can't go left or right; it can only go forward. And I think that from a safety standpoint, I think that that's good. All you need to do is be able to operate the throttle and the brake. You either start it or you stop it. That's all you have to think about.
So you're at Q. This is in the mid 90s, and of course,
Yeah.
everybody, well, probably late 90s when they told you hit the road.
Yeah, it was one of those things, and we joked about it later because there's been enough people in the building. The phrase that you have to avoid in broadcasting is, they want to see you. And everybody I've spoken to that ever got let go, I don't know what it is, Rob, but it's not one guy wants to see you, more than one, and it's they want to see you. And so you just have to say, if you are working currently, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast and you currently work at a radio station, take it from me, old hand Jay Baker. If you hear at the end of your air shift, they want to see you. So anyway, yes, so I got the they want to see you, turn in your playbook. You're no longer a member of the Colts. But it was one of those things where they've needed me to come back and work more behind the scenes because of computer programming and some other things. So I've been in the building for a long time, and then I started doing weekends again on Q, and it was just strange to sort of transition from, hey, you're physically in the building. would you like to be back on the air? And yeah, I leapt at the chance because I really miss that day to day being on the air.
And it just, like I said, it just feels right. Like I've heard you on there, and it's like, I used to obviously listen to and work together at 1019. It's like it's like seeing, like, it'd been like if Mickey Mantle would have worn an Orioles uniform. The guy's still playing baseball, but he's a Yankee. And
Yeah.
Jay is always Q95.
No, thank you.
Now, the question I've been asked since I told people you're going to be on this week, are we going to see a return of Dick Nixon?
What was really funny was one of the producers from their show was walking down the hallway and he goes, "Oh man, I know you're busy. I know you're busy, but we'd like to have you come in again." But it used to be the day that they'd have me come in because of just the way the Bob and Tom schedule works was always on Fridays. But now that we're in the NFL season, they have this NFL roundtable show, and I think it's like Jack Trudeau and Philip B. Wilson from the Indianapolis Star. So they don't have room for Dick Nixon. But I'm going to lobby for post NFL. Tom, you want to put me back in on Fridays? I'll come in every Friday and do what you want. I'm like a hand puppet. Yeah, so that I'm lobbying for it to do, and knock on wood, I still have a great relationship with them, and it's funny seeing Tom because Tom is still the boyhood Tom I remember from the '80s, but now Tom has morphed into very busy Tom because here's what a lot of people don't really realize, perhaps, or maybe the full implication hasn't sunk in. Bob and Tom now, and this is above and beyond Howard Stern, have become the most successful morning show in the history of radio. Did you know that?
I did not.
Their sheer staying power, the ratings that they have, the fact that they're on 160 or more radio stations throughout the United States, and they've been doing this consistently for the length of time that they've been doing it, they are now officially the most successful morning show on radio. And to think about, these are just guys we hung out with. And I've had the good fortune of being part of that, and I think it's cool. And you and I both know that if you've been part of something and then you're talking to people and it's like, "Hey, yeah, I used to be a writer on the Bob and Tom show." People would look at you like, "Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, sure, buddy." "Hey, Pete Rose and the Big Red Machine?" Yeah, I was the Bat Boy." Yeah, yeah, sure you were. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing to me, the nostalgia for Nixon, and in a strange way, not to demean what Bob and Tom have done, but it's almost like since they stopped being local, there is nostalgia for all the great things they did. And
Yeah.
I mean, you have 5,000 Facebook friends. I don't even know 5,000 people, much less have 5,000 people that want to be my friend on Facebook.
Well, and I'm proud of that as well. And by the way, as you're saying this, I really do need to do a fan page because what I'd love to do is put regular content on there because I was up to like 6,000, which was the limit. But about 900 people dropped out, mostly because there was no input whatsoever, because I was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it was really funny because we got another buddy standing around here, and I love his Facebook stuff, and I used to blow him the business all the time on his Facebook page. But now I can't even get to his Facebook page because it's like I can't get past my Facebook page, which is like this overwhelming roadblock.
Right.
Because in a lot of ways, while it's been cool that I'm known in Indianapolis as a radio personality, I'm just a kid that went to Elkhart Memorial in a lot of ways.
Right.
In more ways than you know.
But here's what I'm thinking we could do. If we get that Jay Baker fan page on Facebook, we can blow up the Bring Back Dick Nixon.
That's right. We can get a groundswell, grassroots organization, and we'll be led to victory.
I really want to thank you for taking the time to do this with us today.
I
think
it's been
blast.
Great. Now, have we I felt like we just scratched the surface.
Well, I think so.
If you want more stories, you let me know.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, you want to hold a few back for your second appearance.
Well, you think about it, like if you had a chance to meet Jeff Bridges, you'd want to ask him a lot of Lebowski questions, but you'd also realize, well, no, there's more other things, like the fact that, hey, your dad was his first name Bridges, Lloyd, the scuba diver, who also was in all the great the movies,
Yeah, I want to have one where we just tell radio stories, but I figured to do that, Springsteen reference, it'd be like asking the guy to play Born in the USA. You want to hear all the songs,
Yeah.
Not just
Well, and I think it's cool to have radio stories, and I think it's cool, just to leave you with this, and not to go too nutty about this. But the one thing that has always drawn me to radio is somebody said this to me, so this is not my phrase, but it's so powerful. Radio is the most is the most personal medium. And what that means is when you hear something on the radio, you're there by yourself. So let's say you're driving into work and it's, Saturday and you've got to work on a Saturday and it's kind of rainy and you got to fight with your girlfriend and life's not treating you all that well and everything. And then there's a guy on the radio who's like, "Hey, here's a song, pretty deep, Silver, Blue, and Gold by Bad Company. I think you're going to really like it. Lyrics really mean a lot. And it's a rainy day, so you look up at the sky, and all of a sudden, here's this great, Paul Rogers vocal, and this guy's, and it all comes together to the point where you share that with them personally. And that's why, and here's my other tip. I'm leaving way too many tips. It's like Nigel and Mansell. Here's what, or Mansell, or not Nigel Mansell, Nigel and Hammer. Was, I'm like leaving now here's a little thing for you kids out there. Always take your vitamins and listen to your parents, drink your milk. But if you ever hear any radio announcer, even your favorite, and he starts going, "Hey, all you guys," or "Hey, my audience," or whatever, just, I don't want to diminish them in your ears, but the bottom line is it's a you. If I'm speaking to you,
Right.
You and I are having a conversation right now. Someone's going to listen to this on a podcast, and they're going to say, "This sounds like two old friends
Right.
discussing politics, baseball, radio," because that's what podcasting is. It's a personal thing.
Right.
And so, therefore, your radio experience should still be personable. So it should still be your announcer going, "Hey, here's the weather that you are going to experience today."
Now, I was hoping you could tell one story because it
Sure.
comes up on this show quite a bit. Not your story, but this guy. You met Dennis DeYoung one time.
Oh, yes.
And as everyone knows, I am a huge DeYoung fan.
You love DeYoung.
I hate Tommy Shaw. Jay and I have been having this conversation for the better part of 11 years now.
Well, I always send Rob, and I got a chance to meet Tommy as well. I don't have quite the bone to pick with Tommy, but I always love to just keep Rob going by any correspondence I send him. I'd go, "Remember, Tommy Shaw is not Styx." But yeah, I got to meet Dennis DeYoung, and
That was at Q.
Yeah, it was. Was it Harvest Moon or something?
Desert Moon.
Desert Moon, right? There we go.
Harvest Moon was Neil Young.
There we go. It's all blending together for me. Drugs are not good, kids. It affects your memory. But yeah, Desert Moon comes out, and Bob and Tom were looking for artists that could be on Bob and Tom Live Day. And, at the time, we didn't have the technical ability to do huge bands.
Right.
So it was like...
And this was probably like 90, 89, 90, somewhere in there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and maybe even a little sooner.
This was after the first time Tommy Shaw got pissed off at him.
Right.
Kicked him out of the band.
So here's DeYoung, and he said... And, and Rob and I have talked about this. There are some people you meet who are just insanely talented, and Dennis DeYoung is like that. Because Dennis DeYoung noodling on a piano, singing to himself, because, we could overhear the sound check, is...
So you're like in another room and you
Right.
can hear him.
Yeah. That's more than what 90% of the current artists can bring to the table.
Right.
But you and I both know, a la like if you have a Ferrari motor, if you have a Ford Pinto transmission, your car won't go anywhere. So if you're Dennis DeYoung and you're insanely talented, but you have some type of whatever, you can't get along with your bandmates, or you have an illness, and I'm not making fun of any of his illness
Right.
stuff, because he supposedly had that photoreactive
Right,
thing where he
couldn't look
couldn't
in
be
the
on
light.
stage and couldn't be on stage with lights. If that interferes with getting that incredible talent out there, it won't happen. And great stories. Sam Kinison, perhaps the most brilliant stand-up ever, but man, that Ford Pinto transmission, it failed on him a number of times. And in fact, to the point where you'll appreciate this. And that you asked me about DeYoung, and I'm talking about Sam Kinison, but when Kinison did his big tour here in Indianapolis, he appeared at Butler, and I got to open up for him as a stand-up comic.
Oh, wow.
Now the road manager puts his big hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "Now, kid, listen, I know you're trying to be funny and everything, and people told me you're funny, but listen, Sam, they're all here to see Sam, so I want you to just go out there, tell a couple of your funny jokes, get the hell off the stage, bring Sam on." "Yes, sir. No problem, sir." Well, you'll love this. About 30 seconds later, same manager, "Oh, listen, we're having a little trouble getting Sam up. He's he's having a little trouble in his dressing room. So I'll tell you what, why don't you stand up there on stage and, do your stuff, and then I'll flash the light. And then when you see the light flash, you know that Sam's getting ready to come on. And you're like, okay. And thankfully I'd done a lot of stand-up comedy at that stage. But they couldn't get Sam roused for about 16 or 17 minutes. All of a sudden you realize that, oh no, they really are here to see Sam. And it's taken a long time, because in comedy, 15, 16 minutes is like, holy cow. So once again, Pinto transmission. You got the Ferrari motor, but you got to have a Ferrari transmission to get the talent out. And I think that's kind of what happened to Dennis Young. You and I talked. Here's a guy that kind of some of the rock and roll world bypassed him.
Right.
But the talent is really there. And I think it's great that you are such a fan, because it takes that fan to say, listen to Jackson Brown. No, really go to YouTube and look up Michael Stanley Band.
Right.
No, listen to Dennis DeYoung. He was really on to something.
So you got a chance to meet him.
Yeah, I just talked to him just briefly, but I was obviously very aware that this guy was the real deal. And I think the handful of early rock stars that I met, he was probably about the third or fourth like real legitimate rock star. Mostly because, once again, growing up in northern Indiana, Styx was just started out as a regional band. They were on Wooden Nickel Records, which was later acquired by RCA. And literally, Styx would be playing almost like a high school prom in that era in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
I'm just going to keep you till the end of the hour. That's right. Like another 5 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Because I wanted to...
Am I monopolizing the entire
you're doing great.
Rob Kendall podcast?
I'm just going to have to deal with April D when we get back home, so that's okay. I'll explain it to her. Don't worry. Big football game coming up on Saturday.
That's right.
And I did want to talk to you about this because you are the world's biggest Alabama fan.
Thank you.
Now, but I want to get your opinion on Manziel because I know the Uncle Jay I know, and by the way, our guest is Jay Baker today. The Uncle Jay I know is probably going, good job, Johnny Football. Good job. But the adult Jay, I know, is going, son, you got a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing is, the guy's insanely talented. And Alabama, I think, really was the best team last year. I mean, there were some quibbles. Always with the BCS, you're always going to have that, because the neck of the bottle gets pretty narrow at the end. Only the top teams, undefeated teams. And Alabama had lost a game, ironically, to Texas A&M. Johnny Manziel took them apart piece by piece. Now, this is a team that's coached by Coach Saban, Nick Saban, who is the man, and Kirby Smart, who's the man part deux.
Well, and you actually went to a Bama football game.
It's just the atmosphere, the whole thing. It is, along with Notre Dame, which you're a huge fan of. Notre Dame and Alabama are the two most storied football programs, if you will, and both the tailgating experience in South Bend, the tailgating experience, down in Tuscaloosa. I mean, it has to be seen to be believed.
You should spend the week doing it.
Oh, you just should spend the day reveling on it. But what was funny was Johnny Manziel absolutely schooled them. He took Alabama, turned him into a pretzel, and tossed him by the side of the road. Of interest to me will be when this game reconvenes. It will be at Texas A&M, and you will get an opportunity to see, hopefully, what Coach Saban can do when he has 2 weeks to prepare because Bama's coming off their bye week. But I think it'll be kind of cool because win, lose, or draw in that game, they're facing Johnny Manziel. Because what if Manziel had been, let's say, suspended for 3 games or 4 games, misses the Bama game, Bama wins? It would be real easy for the entire nation to say, well, Johnny Manziel wasn't there. Now, if Bama wins, and I certainly hope they do, I'm not such a zealot that I can't. By the way, the buddy that's here in the room will text me about a half hour before the game, go Aggies, so because he's cruising for a bruising. But at any rate, it's one of those things where win, lose, or draw in that game, I think Alabama has like this unfinished destiny thing. And it's not like they're going to humiliate them or anything, but I would hope that they win. I hope they win in a really workmanlike fashion, and I hope that people kind of see that Johnny Manziel is human after all.
Well, it's funny because I was talking with one of my Twitter friends. It's amazing how people just become identified as your Twitter friends.
Your Twitter buddy, yeah.
She's very beautiful, but also very knowledgeable about football, and she was lamenting that Saban has spent like his whole year, like a year, just focus on this game, and she's like, shouldn't you focus on all the games? And I said, I don't think that's quite how it works when you're Nick Saban.
No. And Nick Saban, if you read anything at all about Nick Saban, he apparently has the same thing for lunch every day. They have somebody that kind of caters the Alabama coaching staff during the week. Saban has the exact same thing because, quote, that's just one less thing I have to think about.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, the guy's
That's
unbelievable.
what, as I said, he is the college version of Belichick.
Oh yeah.
And I just told her, I said, I think obsessed would be the word I would use.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh, and speaking of sports fans, boy, and I'm going to get the title wrong. I think it's called The War Room. It's the story of how Belichick builds teams and their draft day behaviors. Because if you notice with the NFL draft, there's a little bit of talk. Well, I don't know. Maybe the Cards will trade up to get that one guy they really
Right.
need. You know, you always hear that. Watch what the Patriots do every year and realize that, oh no,
They trade
it's
down.
a real time.
Right.
They trade down. And they'll do stuff like, hey, 5th and 6th round picks next year because they know what to leverage to get exactly what they want because they have a system. That's why, sadly one of the players has committed a felony or reportedly.
He's in a little bit of trouble.
He's what we call he has done some things wrong.
Right.
Well, if you have Hernandez and Gronkowski to throw to, you're gonna do pretty well because once again, those are system players. Apparently, Hernandez had some impulse control problems
Well,
that translated into a possible homicide.
think about this. Brady's targets were Gronkowski and Hernandez. One is been charged with murder. The other guy's famous for being photographed with his adult film star live-in girlfriend.
Sure. With his shirt off at a celebration. Yeah.
That's
Well, and the guy's like just this manimal, as we used to call him when we were in school. He's a manimal. He's part man, part animal. But these guys are manimals, and and it is a shame. And and once again, if your life has been touched directly by Aaron Hernandez, this is probably not funny to you. But when you see Gronkowski, remember even with that arm injury, I saw him catch a pass last year where he catches it one-armed, goes out of bounds, and slams onto his hurt arm. It's like, what a guy.
Well, and my favorite thing was about Gronkowski was his apology to Mr. Kraft after the photo with him and the attractive woman who chose a career in film surfaced on the internet.
She did what we called film work, and her film work was of an adult nature. That's what I always like to say later, because sometimes if you're trying to forge a career and you say to yourself, some of the more traditional Diane Keaton roles have not been offered to me. I'm kind of taking a little different routing here.
Well, ironically, as I think it was pointed out, she had more clothes on in the photo than he did.
That is ironic, isn't it?
She was just supporting the team.
Well, if you are a professional ball player, sometimes you'll attract a certain fan, and they're voracious, and that's part of the appeal. Rob, I don't know if you knew this. This is kind of a thing that a lot of people don't think about, but it's not just the salary of being a ball player. It's some of the perks.
Yeah, there's fandom.
Absolutely. In fact, I heard another podcast where two guys were asking themselves why RG3's girlfriend wasn't cuter, meaning that he is such a, he's such a big NFL star that he should surely be attracting, a supermodel or above status.
Right. You shouldn't date for love. You should date for attractiveness.
My goodness.
That's worked out so well for both of us.
Well, absolutely. I just think that one should be cavalier in one's approach to marriage.
Jay, when can people hear you again on the Q? It's nightly.
Yes, it is nightly from 7 to midnight. And, many people would say, well, Jay, that's not as cool a shift as you used to have. I just say, baby, it's a shift.
Jay, thank you so much for doing this with us this week. I had a blast.
Well, thank you. I feel like we have a few more stories that we can tell, and I'm really glad that you're doing the podcast. I think it's great, too, that you're doing some additional writing, and where can people read your new writing?
You can actually purchase the book of which Jay did the foreword, Path Less Traveled, on Amazon.com. And in Jay's foreword, there's reference to Old Man Arms, a YMCA, Applebee's,
and Kendall on Kendall, which later came true.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. So you can go to Amazon.com and read Jay's writing. It's when you wrote it, I told somebody, I said, this is either going to be really good or I'm going to get a bunch of stick figures and I'm going to have to decipher what Jay's trying to say, but it's very good.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And your editor did a really good job because I think my early version was stick figures and they really fleshed it out.
It
So
was
that was
like
really
the
nice.
caveman day. So anyway, everybody check Jay out. Q95, 7 to midnight, M through F, right?
That's right. Monday through Friday. And I am on Saturdays 10 to 3. And I'm also on iHeartRadio,
That's
which
right.
is another product from Clear Channel Media and Entertainment. And you got to get the name right because it was just Clear Channel Communications. Now it's Media and Entertainment. And as I've always said, it's entertaining working at a Clear Channel radio station.
Jay Baker, company man to the end. Thank you very much for listening to us this week. You've been tuned into The Rob Kendall Show.